In the grand tapestry of human history, few cultures captivate our imaginations quite like those of ancient Greece and Rome. These two civilizations, whose influences still echo in modern thought, politics and art, are often regarded as the pillars upon which Western culture is built. From philosophy to architecture, their contributions are well known and frequently celebrated. However, one fascinating aspect of their world that is often overlooked is the rich and diverse natural world they inhabited, a world that, in many ways, no longer exists. The ancient Greeks and Romans lived in a time when the boundaries between humans and the wild were not as firmly drawn as they are today. Their cities, though impressive by the standards of their time, were often surrounded by vast stretches of untamed nature. This wilderness was home to a variety of creatures, some of which would be unimaginable to see today. What makes this even more intriguing is that some of these animals, now lost to extinction, played significant roles in the lives and cultures of these ancient people. Imagine walking through the ancient streets of Rome or the rolling hills of Greece, knowing that beyond the cities lay forests where creatures such as massive aurochs, wild lions, and even elephants roamed. These animals were not confined to distant exotic lands, but were part of the daily lives of the people who lived in these classical civilizations. They were hunted for food, displayed in arenas for sport, and immortalized in art and literature. Some were revered for their strength and beauty, while others were feared or hunted to the brink of extinction. In many ways, these animals helped to shape the identity of these civilizations. The lions of Greece and the tigers of Rome were not just wild creatures. They were symbols of power and majesty, often associated with gods and heroes. The aurochs, the massive wild ancestors of modern cattle, were a source of both sustenance and awe, representing the raw power of nature. And the North African elephants, famously used by Hannibal in his campaign against Rome, became legendary for their strength and utility in warfare. But the world of ancient Greece and Rome was also a world on the brink of change. As these civilizations expanded, they brought with them not only culture and progress, but also the seeds of destruction for many of the animals they encountered. Hunting, deforestation, and the spread of human settlements pushed many species to extinction. The Roman arenas, famous for their gladiatorial spectacles, became places where exotic animals were paraded and then killed for the amusement of the public, further hastening the decline of these creatures. The growing demand for land, resources, and entertainment meant that the natural world was gradually tamed and, in some cases, eradicated. The stories of these extinct animals serve as a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between civilization and nature. In their time, the Greeks and Romans may not have realized the long-term consequences of their actions. They likely saw the world as abundant and eternal, with animals as a resource to be used or a challenge to be overcome. But as we look back from our modern perspective, we can see the traces of what was lost, and how these civilizations, like so many others throughout history, altered the natural world around them, often without understanding the full impact of their actions. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, animals were not just background elements in the story of human achievement. They were integral to the way people understood their world. Lions appeared in myths and legends, tigers were symbols of exotic power, and elephants were the ultimate representation of strength in battle. Even the now extinct Arabian ostrich, once a common sight in the deserts, had its place in Roman spectacles and lore. These creatures weren't just animals. They were part of the cultural fabric, woven into the stories that shaped the identities of these societies. In the writings of ancient historians, poets, and philosophers, we find vivid descriptions of these animals. Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote about the lions that roamed the northern reaches of Greece, while Pliny the Elder, a Roman author and naturalist, provided detailed accounts of animals that are now long gone. These records give us a glimpse into a world that is both familiar and alien, a world where humans lived alongside animals that modern people can only read about in books or see in museum displays. Yet, for all their reverence of nature and its creatures, the ancient Greeks and Romans were also a driving force behind the extinction of many species. The arenas of Rome, where exotic animals were pitted against each other or against humans, became a place of spectacle and bloodshed, contributing to the rapid decline of some species. The demand for hunting trophies, the expansion of farmland, and the growth of cities all played a role in pushing certain animals to the edge of extinction. In some cases, these animals were wiped out entirely, leaving behind only traces in the archaeological record and in the works of ancient writers. As we delve into the stories of these extinct animals, we not only learn about the natural world of the past, but also reflect on the complex relationship between human civilization and the environment. The Greeks and Romans lived in a world teeming with life, yet their actions, whether intentional or not, contributed to the loss of that diversity. Their legacy in this regard is a double-edged sword. They gave us the foundations of Western thought and culture, but they also left behind a trail of extinction that serves as a cautionary tale for future generations. The animals that the ancient Greeks and Romans saw and interacted with were not just passive observers of history. They were active participants, shaping the course of human events in ways both subtle and profound. From the battlefields where elephants clashed with Roman legions to the forests where lions hunted and were hunted, these creatures were part of the story of human civilization. And though they are now extinct, their legacy lives on in the myths, art, and histories of Greece and Rome, reminders of a time when the world was wilder, more dangerous, and more alive with the roar of creatures that no longer walk the earth. As we embark on this journey through history, we will explore the stories of these remarkable animals, creatures that once roamed the same lands as philosophers, emperors, and warriors. Through their tales, we will gain a deeper understanding of the world the ancient Greeks and Romans lived in, and how their actions, both deliberate and accidental, contributed to the extinction of these animals. This is not just a story of loss. It is a story of how human civilization has always been intertwined with the natural world, for better or worse. And in understanding this, we can perhaps learn how to better protect the world we have left. As we explore the fascinating world of extinct animals that once roamed the lands of ancient Greece and Rome, it's important to remember that our understanding of the world today is shaped not only by the histories we uncover, but also by the way we consume information. In a world where news and media are more accessible than ever, we're constantly bombarded with information from all corners of the globe. Every day, countless stories are published about environmental issues, animal conservation, historical discoveries, and more. But with this flood of information comes a unique challenge. How do we know what to trust? How do we ensure that the news we consume is accurate, reliable, and unbiased? This is where ground news comes in, and it's an important tool that can change the way we think about and interact with the media. Ground news is a news comparison platform that allows users to see how different news outlets around the world report on the same story. This helps to cut through the noise and gives people the power to understand how bias, whether it's political, cultural, or economic, can shape the way a story is told. In a world where the same event can be framed in radically different ways depending on the outlet, ground news provides a valuable resource to help us make sense of it all. Let's say, for instance, that you come across a news story about animal extinction, a topic that's incredibly relevant to what we're discussing here today. One outlet might emphasize the environmental factors leading to the extinction of a species, such as deforestation, climate change, or hunting. Another outlet might focus on the economic or political ramifications, such as how conservation efforts are being funded or the impact of policies on wildlife preservation. A third outlet might sensationalize the story, focusing on the emotional impact of losing a beloved species or playing up the drama of extinction to attract more clicks. In each case, while the core facts of the story might remain the same, the framing and emphasis can vary dramatically. Without a tool like ground news, it's easy to get swept up in one narrative without realizing there are other perspectives to consider. What makes ground news particularly powerful is its ability to highlight bias in a way that's both accessible and easy to understand. The platform doesn't just tell you that a certain story is biased, it shows you how. By laying out stories from a wide range of news sources side by side, ground news allows you to compare the language, focus, and framing of each article. For example, in one story about animal extinction, you might find that a right-leaning news outlet places more emphasis on the economic impact of conservation efforts, while a left-leaning source might focus more on the ethical and environmental concerns. Ground news even provides a political bias meter that helps users understand where a given news source falls on the political spectrum, further aiding in making informed decisions about the information they're consuming. But ground news isn't just about political bias. It also helps users understand how regional or cultural biases can shape a story. Take the ancient Roman and Greek world we're discussing in this video. If a major discovery about an extinct species tied to these civilizations were uncovered today, different countries might approach the story in varying ways. A Greek news outlet might emphasize the connection to their ancient heritage, while a British or American outlet might focus more on the scientific breakthrough itself. Ground news would allow you to see all of these different angles, giving you a fuller, more comprehensive understanding of the story. This kind of global perspective is essential when it comes to understanding the larger narratives that shape our world. In the case of extinct animals, for instance, ground news can help users see the big picture. While one news outlet might focus on the immediate causes of extinction, like overhunting or habitat destruction, another might dig deeper into the long-term consequences, such as the ecological ripple effects that follow the loss of a species. With ground news, users can compare these different approaches and gain a deeper understanding of the complex web of factors that contribute to the extinction of animals. Let's take a real-world example to demonstrate how ground news works in action. Imagine there's a breaking news story about the discovery of fossils from an extinct animal that the ancient Romans once used in gladiatorial games. Some outlets might focus on the historical aspect of the story, emphasizing the connection to Roman culture and the spectacle of the games. Others might approach it from a scientific angle, discussing what the discovery reveals about the animal's anatomy or behavior. A third group of outlets might use the story to highlight the broader issue of animal exploitation, both in ancient times and in the modern world. With ground news, you can see how each of these narratives is being framed, compare them side by side, and form your own well-rounded understanding of the event. Ground news also provides a unique feature that allows users to track how a story evolves over time. In the case of animal conservation, for example, you might want to see how the coverage of a particular species extinction has changed in response to new scientific discoveries or political actions. Ground news gives you the tools to do just that. By analyzing the trajectory of a story, you can see which outlets updated their coverage as new information became available, and which ones stuck to an outdated or biased narrative. This is particularly valuable for long-term issues like conservation, where the story is constantly evolving as new developments come to light. Moreover, ground news helps combat the echo chamber effect that's so common in today's media landscape. It's easy to fall into the habit of only reading news from sources that align with your own worldview, which can reinforce biases and limit your understanding of complex issues. Ground news encourages users to break out of their media bubbles by providing them with a range of perspectives they might not otherwise encounter. In the case of extinct animals, for example, you might normally read articles that emphasize the environmental impact of species loss. But by using ground news, you can also explore articles that discuss the economic or political dimensions of the issue, giving you a broader and more nuanced perspective. Another standout feature of ground news is its ability to expose blind spots, areas of coverage that are underreported by certain media outlets. This can be incredibly eye-opening as it reveals which stories are being ignored or downplayed by specific sources. For example, you might find that a major discovery about an extinct species is heavily covered in scientific journals but barely mentioned in mainstream news outlets. Or perhaps a particular news organization is focusing on local wildlife issues while ignoring global extinction trends. Ground news helps you identify these gaps in coverage, ensuring that you're getting the full story, not just a filtered version. In a world where misinformation and biased reporting are all too common, ground news provides a critical service by helping users navigate the complexities of modern media. Whether you're interested in ancient history, conservation efforts, or current events, ground news empowers you to be a more informed and discerning consumer of information. As we dive deeper into the world of extinct animals that the ancient Greeks and Romans encountered, tools like ground news remind us of the importance of understanding the bigger picture, both in history and in the news we consume today. In essence, ground news is more than just a news platform. It's a vital tool for critical thinking in the 21st century. By offering a clear, unbiased view of how different sources report on the same stories, it equips users with the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about the world around them. So, as we continue our journey through history, uncovering the stories of creatures long gone, let's not forget the importance of understanding how those stories are told today, and how we can all become better, more informed citizens of the world with tools like ground news at our disposal. As we transition into the heart of our exploration, it's time to delve into the lives of the animals that once walked the earth alongside the ancient Greeks and Romans. These creatures, now extinct, were not just passive participants in history. They shaped the world around them and were, in turn, shaped by the rise and fall of civilizations. Some were revered for their strength and power, while others were feared or hunted to extinction. The interactions between these ancient people and the animals they encountered provide us with a window into a world that no longer exists, a world where the natural and human realms were more deeply intertwined than they are today. Our first stop on this journey is the aurox, a massive wild ancestor of modern cattle that once roamed the forests and plains of Europe, including the territories of ancient Greece and Rome. The aurochs were legendary for their size and strength, towering over domestic cattle and boasting powerful curved horns that could stretch nearly 3 feet from tip to tip. Standing nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing over 1,000 pounds, these creatures were a symbol of brute force and raw wilderness. In many ways, the aurochs were to ancient Europe what the American bison was to the Great Plains. A majestic and intimidating force of nature, impossible to ignore and revered by those who encountered them. For the ancient Greeks, aurochs were likely seen as a challenge, both in terms of their physical might and their symbolic power. The Greeks, who were known for their reverence of nature and its creatures, may have seen the aurochs as a reflection of the untamable wild, a force that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. In Greek mythology, powerful animals were often associated with the gods, and it is easy to imagine that the aurochs could have been viewed through this lens as a creature blessed with divine strength and endurance. Their physical presence was so overwhelming that to hunt or conquer one would have been seen as a heroic feat. The Romans, on the other hand, were more pragmatic in their approach to the natural world. As their empire expanded, they increasingly saw animals not only as part of the wilderness, but also as resources, whether for food, labor, or entertainment. The Roman relationship with aurochs reflected this duality. On one hand, the aurochs were hunted for their meat, hides, and horns, which were used to craft tools, weapons, and even ceremonial objects. On the other hand, their sheer size and strength made them a target for the grand spectacles that played out in Roman arenas. The Romans had a long history of using wild animals in gladiatorial games, and the aurochs, with their formidable size and fierce temperament, would have made for an impressive and terrifying opponent. In both Greek and Roman societies, the aurox held a certain mystique, a reminder of the untamed world that lay beyond the cities, a world that, despite humanity's best efforts, could never be fully conquered. As civilizations grew and the wilderness retreated, however, the aurochs became increasingly rare. Hunting, deforestation, and the expansion of agricultural land all contributed to their decline. By the time of the Roman Empire's height, aurochs were already disappearing from many parts of Europe. The last known aurochs died in the forests of Poland in the early 17th century, leaving behind only myths, legends, and the skeletal remains that tell us of their once dominant presence in the ancient world. Next, we move to one of the most iconic and feared predators of the ancient world, the European lion. Today, lions are associated with the grasslands and savannas of Africa. But thousands of years ago, lions roamed much of Europe, including Greece and parts of Italy. These European lions, which were likely a subspecies of the African lion, were an integral part of the natural landscape in ancient times. They stalked the same forests that the Greeks hunted in and became symbols of power, majesty, and dominance in both Greek and Roman culture. For the Greeks, lions were more than just animals. They were embodiments of strength and courage. The lion's place in Greek mythology is well known, with perhaps the most famous example being the Nemean lion, a monstrous creature that Hercules, was tasked with defeating as one of his 12 labors. According to the myth, the Nemean lion's hide was so tough that no weapon could pierce it, making the creature nearly invincible. Heracles ultimately defeated the lion by strangling it with his bare hands, a feat that became a symbol of his immense strength and heroism. Lions also appeared in other myths and stories, often representing the untamed forces of nature that heroes were required to overcome. The Romans, as they did with many things, took the symbolic power of the lion and incorporated it into their culture in a way that was uniquely Roman. Lions were brought from the far reaches of the empire, often from North Africa, and used in gladiatorial games and public spectacles. The sight of a lion in the Colosseum, pitted against gladiators or other animals, was meant to awe the crowd and remind them of the power of Rome. Lions became symbols of the emperor's ability to control even the most fearsome of beasts, reinforcing the idea that Roman might could conquer anything, human or animal. Despite their prominence in myth and spectacle, European lions were not destined to last. The combination of hunting, habitat loss, and the growing human population in Europe led to their gradual extinction. By the time of the Roman Empire's later years, lions were no longer found in the wild in Europe, their presence confined to the pages of history and the remains of ancient arenas. Another incredible predator that once roamed the lands of ancient Rome was the Caspian tiger. Unlike its cousin, the more well-known Bengal or Siberian tiger, the Caspian tiger inhabited the forests and plains stretching from the Middle East into Central Asia, with some of its territory overlapping with the Roman Empire's eastern provinces. These tigers were slightly smaller than their Siberian relatives, but no less formidable. They were fierce hunters, known for their agility, strength, and solitary nature. The Caspian tiger's interactions with humans were often violent, as it was a creature to be feared and respected. It is believed that some of these tigers were captured and transported to Roman arenas, where they were used in gladiatorial games, much like lions. The sight of a tiger, an animal exotic and terrifying to most Romans, must have been an awe-inspiring and chilling spectacle. Like lions, tigers were also symbols of power, often associated with the far reaches of the empire, where wild and dangerous creatures still ruled the landscape. As with many large predators, the Caspian tiger's fate was sealed by human activity. Deforestation, hunting, and competition with human settlers for prey drove the species to extinction. By the early 20th century, the last Caspian tigers had disappeared, leaving behind only traces of their existence in ancient texts and the occasional fossil. Moving away from the large predators, we encounter one of the more surprising inhabitants of the ancient world, the dwarf elephants. These small, unique elephants lived on several Mediterranean islands, including Cyprus, Crete and Malta, during the late Pleistocene era. Though they had likely disappeared by the time classical Greek civilization reached its peak, there is evidence to suggest that early Greek settlers may have encountered their remains or heard stories of their existence. These elephants were significantly smaller than their mainland counterparts, with some standing only a few feet tall at the shoulder. The existence of dwarf elephants would have been a marvel to the ancient Greeks. In a world where elephants were already considered extraordinary due to their size and strength, the idea of a miniature version of these majestic creatures would have been equally fascinating. The Greeks, who had a deep appreciation for both the mythical and the real aspects of the natural world, might have viewed these dwarf elephants as creatures from legend. Their remains could have inspired tales of strange miniature beasts that roamed distant islands, feeding into the rich tradition of myth and storytelling that permeated Greek culture. Finally, we come to one of the most iconic animals of the Roman world, the North African elephant. These elephants, smaller than their Asian and African savanna cousins, were native to the forests and mountains of North Africa, particularly around modern-day Algeria and Tunisia. They became famous in the ancient world largely because of their role in warfare. The most notable example is, of course, Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who led a force of North African elephants across the Alps during the Second Punic War. The sight of elephants marching through the mountains must have been both terrifying and awe-inspiring to the Roman soldiers who faced them. For the Romans, the North African elephant was a symbol of foreign power and the dangers that lurked beyond the borders of the empire. The Roman response to Hannibal's elephants was to defeat them through clever tactics, but they also recognized the value of using such impressive beasts in their own military campaigns and spectacles. Elephants were soon incorporated into Roman warfare and were also paraded in the arenas of Rome, where their size and strength made them popular attractions in gladiatorial games. Unfortunately, the North African elephant's role in warfare and entertainment contributed to its decline. The combination of overhunting, habitat loss, and the pressures of war led to the extinction of the species by the time of the late Roman Empire. Today, the only trace of these magnificent creatures exists in the art and writings of the ancient world. These animals, once part of the vibrant and dangerous natural world that the Greeks and Romans inhabited, are now long gone. Yet their legacy endures in the myths, stories, and histories that these civilizations left behind. They remind us of a time when humans were not the sole masters of the earth, and when the natural world was filled with creatures as awe-inspiring and powerful as the civilizations that rose and fell alongside them. Through their stories, we can glimpse a world where the boundaries between human and animal were more fluid, and where the wild still held sway over the landscape. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through the world of extinct animals that once coexisted with the ancient Greeks and Romans, it's time to reflect on what these vanished creatures can teach us, not just about the distant past, but about the world we live in today. The stories of the aurox, European lions, Caspian tigers, dwarf elephants, North African elephants, and Arabian ostriches offer more than a glimpse into the natural world of ancient times. They provide a lens through which we can examine the often fraught relationship between human civilization and the environment. They remind us that the animals that once roamed alongside humans were not merely passive background elements, but active participants in the shaping of human history and culture. In the ancient world, animals were woven into the very fabric of society. They were symbols of strength, power, and mystery, and they were feared and revered in equal measure. The aurochs, with their immense size and strength, were seen as living embodiments of untamed nature, a force that humans could not fully control but sought to dominate nonetheless. Their legacy survives today not only in ancient texts and artworks, but in the cattle that were domesticated from them, a reminder of how humanity has continuously reshaped the natural world to suit its needs. Yet, the extinction of the aurochs speaks to the destructive power of that very same relationship. By hunting them into oblivion and converting their habitats into farmland, humans erased a species that had once symbolized the wild, untamable frontier that lay beyond the reach of civilization. The European lion offers a similar lesson. Once widespread across the continent, these majestic predators were systematically hunted, both for their threat to human settlements and for the sheer challenge they represented. For the Greeks, lions were central figures in mythology, their raw power immortalized in the stories of heroes like Heracles. In Rome, they became icons of imperial might, paraded through the Colosseum as living proof of the empire's ability to conquer and control even the fiercest of nature's creations. But this desire to dominate led to the lion's extinction in Europe long before most people realized what was being lost. The absence of the lion from European landscapes is a stark reminder of how humanity's pursuit of power can lead to unintended and irreversible consequences. Perhaps no creature better exemplifies the complex interplay between humans and nature than the North African elephant. These elephants, smaller than the African savanna elephants we know today, played a pivotal role in one of history's most famous military campaigns, Hannibal's crossing of the Alps during the Second Punic War. For the Romans, the elephants symbolized the terrifying power of a foreign invader, creatures so massive and unstoppable that they seemed almost mythical. Yet, the Romans soon adopted these elephants for their own use, employing them in military campaigns and in the brutal spectacles of the gladiatorial arena. But as with the lions, this exploitation led to their extinction. The very traits that made the elephants valuable to humans, their size, strength, and intelligence, also made them vulnerable to overuse and exploitation. The extinction of the North African elephant is a cautionary tale of how human ambition, combined with a lack of foresight, can lead to the destruction of the very resources that civilizations depend upon. The Caspian tiger, another victim of human encroachment, was a fearsome predator that once roamed the forests and plains from the Middle East to Central Asia. For the ancient Romans, the tiger was an exotic and dangerous creature, often used in arena spectacles to showcase the empire's power over nature. The Romans marveled at the tiger's strength and ferocity, but their exploitation of this species in the arenas, along with habitat loss due to expanding human settlements, contributed to the tiger's eventual extinction in the wild. The story of the Caspian tiger serves as a stark reminder that human fascination with nature's most powerful creatures can often lead to their destruction. The same traits that inspire awe and wonder, strength, speed, and beauty, can also make these animals targets for exploitation, leading to their demise. The dwarf elephants of the Mediterranean islands, while less known, offer a different kind of cautionary tale. These tiny elephants, isolated on islands like Cyprus and Crete, were remnants of an era when the Mediterranean region was home to a diverse array of megafauna. By the time the ancient Greeks arrived on these islands, the dwarf elephants were already gone, victims of climate change and human expansion. But their bones likely inspired the stories of mythical creatures like the Cyclops, as early Greeks interpreted the fossilized skulls with their single large nasal cavity as belonging to one-eyed giants. This blending of myth and reality highlights another aspect of humanity's relationship with nature, the way in which we transform the unknown into stories, legends, and symbols. Yet, behind these myths lie real creatures, now extinct, whose stories remind us of the fragility of life in isolated ecosystems. Then there's the Arabian ostrich, a bird that once roamed the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa. For the Romans, the Arabian ostrich was an exotic curiosity brought to the Colosseum to entertain the masses. These flightless birds, known for their speed and grace, were prized for their feathers and meat. Yet, their capture for Roman spectacles and overhunting for their plumage and eggs led to their eventual extinction by the mid-20th century. The Arabian ostrich's disappearance is a reminder of how even the most resilient creatures can be pushed to the brink when humans disrupt their habitats and hunt them for sport or profit. Their extinction is part of a larger pattern, one that has repeated itself throughout history as human demand for resources, entertainment, and conquest has collided with the natural world. As we reflect on the stories of these animals, it's clear that their extinction was not inevitable. In many cases, their decline was the result of human activities that could have been mitigated or avoided. The forests where aurochs once roamed could have been preserved. The lions of Europe could have been protected rather than hunted to extinction. The elephants that marched with Hannibal could have been spared from the arena. But ancient civilizations, much like modern ones, often placed immediate human needs and desires above the long-term consequences for the natural world. The extinction of these species is a testament to the cost of this short-sightedness. Yet these stories also offer hope. By looking back at the past, we can learn valuable lessons about how to approach the future. The ancient Greeks and Romans may not have had the knowledge or tools to fully understand the impact of their actions on the environment, but today we do. We live in an era where conservation efforts are more critical than ever, and the extinction stories of the past can serve as powerful motivators for protecting the species that still exist today. We know more about ecosystems, biodiversity, and the delicate balance that sustains life on Earth than any previous generation. With this knowledge comes responsibility, a responsibility to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated. These extinct animals, though gone, have left behind a legacy that endures in our myths, our history, and our understanding of the natural world. They remind us that human civilization is not separate from nature, but is deeply intertwined with it. The rise of the Greeks and Romans was made possible in part by the resources they drew from the natural world, including the animals they hunted, domesticated, and, in some cases, drove to extinction. As we continue to study these ancient civilizations, it is important to remember that their relationship with the natural world was complex, and that their actions, both intentional and unintentional, had lasting consequences. In the end, the stories of these extinct animals serve as a bridge between the ancient world and our own. They remind us of the power and beauty of the natural world and of the ways in which humans have shaped and been shaped by that world. They challenge us to consider our own relationship with the environment and to reflect on the legacy we are leaving for future generations. Will we be remembered as the generation that learned from the past and took steps to protect the Earth's remaining species, or as the generation that allowed history to repeat itself? As we close this chapter, let us carry with us the lessons of the aurochs, the lions, the elephants, and the ostriches. Let us remember that the extinction of a species is not just the loss of an animal. It is the loss of a piece of the natural world, a piece of our history, and a piece of ourselves. And let us strive to ensure that the stories of today's animals are not written with the same tragic endings as those of the past.